Okay, and we're live. Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's Company Spotlight. Today, I am speaking with next super stock presenter, CloudMD. Stock symbol is DOCRF, over the counter, and DOC as in Doc, the TSX venture. And the CEO is Dr. Essam Hamza. Dr. Hamza, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Ty.
Absolutely. We had you on our live stream, the next super stock live stream, and I thought today would be just a good opportunity to kind of engage with investors, maybe talk about some of the aspects we may not have had a chance to cover in your presentation, and really help people understand what the big picture is. So with on that note, I mean, CloudMD, you're really at the forefront of a major change. We had epochal change in medicine. It's really the digital transformation of medicine. So can you, tell our audience what's the opportunity, how big is the market opportunity, and what is CloudMD doing to, serve this market?
Sure, no, absolutely, and that's a great question. Really, the idea I think everybody has to get kind of understand is that we're at like the very beginning stages of a huge industry. So comparables I'm not making it to CloudMD. I'm just saying in general, this is what we're talking about is the very early stages of, let's say, online shopping and the Amazons of the world, or the Netflix streaming and the blockbusters. And so on. And so the key things to understand about these dynamic shifts when they happen is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you see these big hockey stick type of movements in that space because it's a huge opportunity already, and it's a fundamental shift. And so what we're seeing right now are obviously some market leaders in the teledocs of the world and so on, which is great. And you're going to see those continue to grow, and often they tend to grow organically, but often through acquisitions of other players. You see consolidation in the space and so on. But what I want investors to understand is whether it's CloudMD or something else, this is the future of healthcare delivery, and healthcare is huge. And I can't even call it the first inning. I mean, it really is that dynamic of a shift. And so have long-term vision in terms of the space, and in terms of the growth potential of where we're going.
I think one of the big stories right now is that the whole COVID situation has really accelerated adoption of telemedicine. Like something which might have taken 5, 7, 10 years is happening right now.
100%, yeah, absolutely, and so it's one of those things that I mentioned before. I think on the last presentation that there was the 3 barriers we talked about always. We always saw this as the future. 100%, this was going to be the future. We talked about it for years now, last couple of years. The difference is that COVID pushed everything ahead so fast, right? So in terms of the patient's adoption, would they be willing to do it? Doctor adoption, would they be willing to do it, and would they like it? And finally, governments, and it solves that one day in March, where basically the world turned on telemedicine as part of the triaging, moved everything ahead at least 5 years, really. And so really, there's no going back either. Anybody who says, well, I always say the same thing. It's number one, it's political suicide for any government official to ever roll back any telemedicine at this point, because patients, number one, have seen the convenience. They've seen how much better it is, and on top, how much safer it is. But on top of that, would you be willing now, if you had this access a year from now or a year and a half from now, to go and sit in the waiting room and people coughing around you if you don't have to be there? You still need to have doctors. You still need to see doctors physically, for sure. But you should only be there if you need to be there, and not because you don't know what the next person next to you has either. It's going to be that online triaging.
No, it's pretty interesting because you use that analogy of where Amazon was, like sort of like where Amazon was in 1997, with e-commerce, people weren't, and all of a sudden, so basically where telemedicine was probably January of this year is where Amazon was, and now you're basically where Amazon is now. I mean, well, not now, but it's like it's 2008. You've leapfrogged like a massive 10-year thing. So, so with that said, now the company is, just to clarify, right now at the moment you're based in Canada. You're serving the Canadian market.
Yes and no. I mean, we are based in Canada, but we have not just international aspirations, but we did already crack the US market with that first agreement that we did with a company called IDYA4 that we announced, I think a few months ago. And that company already services, CDC, Homeland Security, Department of Corrections, and they're reselling our platform, our telemedicine platform, to those agencies. So we're hoping to see some news coming out of south of the border over time here, and it again addresses a very big market for sure.
Okay.
It shows you that, I mean, we have interest as well internationally, but I mean, it just shows you kind of how the whole world is transitioning.
So you're going after a global opportunity. It's not just Canada.
Yeah, I mean, what we have is very unique in the sense that we're not just providing a telemedicine app, let's say, right? The whole idea of providing telemedicine and video conferencing securely and so on is not unique. There's other companies going after that type of thing. Really, the future is understanding how healthcare is going to be delivered forever, right? Not just for now. And so the virtual kind of walk-in model or the virtual episodic care is not the future. The future is being able to provide continuity care, integrated care, not just the family doctor connecting to that patient, but now being able to be referred to the specialist using the same platform, and the physio and the counselor and the psychiatrist and the pharmacist and the nurse, and everybody connecting to you and sharing your records with them so that they have that continuity of care and understand what the last person did. And you get much better care that way. You engage the patient, which brings out much better outcomes. Governments love it because it reduces costs, right? You're going to get better outcomes. You're going to be able to treat diseases better. And so governments are on board with that idea. And so we're trying to differentiate ourselves in the sense that that's really what we're going after, is this virtual healthcare ecosystem is the future of healthcare. And really, there will be a lot of shiny objects that come because there is a lot of interest in the space right now. But that's not the long-term vision. The vision is to build a very big company that is going to continue past, not just this year, but the next, decades.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you just like a few more, like maybe 2 more questions, because the great thing is it's interactive. We have a lot of great questions coming in. I see on the chat, so we're going to pull those up in a second. So let me just before we get to that, for anybody that's new to the CloudMD story, can you just give us kind of like a quick snapshot of your telemedicine platform and the business model, like from the whole operation, from the clinics to the kiosks, the whole story?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned on that last interview, is that our focus is to kind of revolutionize the way healthcare is delivered. And we've been saying this pre-COVID. So again, there's maybe people talking about a post-COVID, but pre-COVID and now obviously with COVID, is the whole idea of healthcare delivery historically has been broken. It's been very expensive and it's not sustainable. And governments around the world have been trying to find solutions forever. And the reason it didn't work, it was a very doctor-centric model where, you would have to, again, I mentioned before, call in on a Monday morning, try to get through, make an appointment, cross town, sit in the waiting room for an hour and a half, people coughing around you, go into a smaller room, and then finally get a prescription refill and you wasted your whole day, and then you take that prescription and you do the same thing at the pharmacy. It's incredibly inefficient. The doctors didn't like it either. So, I mean, nobody was satisfied. And the government didn't like it because it cost money because people were not being seen efficiently or were going to emergency or not being diagnosed. And so our philosophy is you reverse that. You turn it on its head with technology and you make the patient in the middle. And now you provide, through technology, the whole team and all the services, that whole ecosystem to that patient in the middle, and connect that whole team to them. And you can do that with technology, and it creates efficiency. It creates better outcomes, and it creates kind of a buy-in from everybody involved now, obviously post-COVID, so that the patients like it, the doctors like it, and the governments like it as well. And it is the future of healthcare, and we're just catching up. I mean, really, these technologies and a lot of these things were available for a while. What you're going to see, and what's really exciting, is now the integration of things that we're going to be doing, things like the Apple Watches and the Fitbits and the glucometers, all this rich data that's coming from these devices, and being able to capture it in real time and sharing it with your team and your doctors and so on. That's going to be exciting.
Okay, so you have, like, right, the company came together through, you've integrated a couple of acquisitions. So you have this kind of like vertically integrated model. So can you kind of walk us through that? You have,
yeah. So every one of our acquisitions were standalone assets in themselves, but 1 + 1 is 3 with everything we've done. It's very synergistic. So we own clinics, and we will have a series of clinics that are more hybrid clinics, meaning that doctors work in the clinic maybe a day or two a week, and the rest of the time they're working remotely. So you can have much higher margins, but much better efficiency and scale and better outcomes as well by doing that. And that will be, right across the country. But also we have 2 technology companies, and one of the main ones we bought a year and a half ago is what our technology is built on, which is an electronic medical record company. So what that means is that when you go to your doctor and they're typing away, that's a chart, that's an EMR, electronic medical record. We own one that provides that EMR service to 376 clinics across Canada, 3,000 doctors, and almost 3 million patient charts in our system. And so we are, basically by buying this company, not only did we get, a great technology to build on, which we did, but we also had a very huge low-hanging fruit audience to provide extra services for. And so we were able to acquire customers very cheaply with this, obviously, and we built that platform. So what differentiates us is, again, that every patient that downloads the app and registers gets a chart that follows them for the rest of their life. And that's really important. Again, like I said, I mean, I'm sure we've all ran into problems where you go to a clinic and you have to explain what's wrong, and then you go see some other doctor and you have to explain the same thing again, and then you see the physio and you have to explain the same thing again, and no one knows what the last person's doing, and hopefully they don't give you something that interacts with the last person did, right? So it's horrible, inefficient, and bad care.
Okay, and then you have what? You have like an app, or how do you do the telemedicine part of the equation?
Yeah, so we have an app that people can download in the App Store, the Google Store, and they can connect that way. And it connects with one of our doctors. But we also provide that app as a B2B side too, so that doctors can see their own patients as well. So we do have SaaS revenue coming from that side of the business. And then we have direct consumer revenue as well, with doctors seeing patients directly on our platform. We collect the revenue, we give 70% to the doctor, we keep the 30%, and the margins are are great there, because again, it's a peer-to-peer, and it doesn't involve labor that much, really, because again, the patients are making their own appointments automatically through the app. They're getting instant confirmations, they're getting automatic reminders, and the doctor's initiating the call, and it goes right to the patient's app as well. So it's one of those things where you reduce the costs and overheads of what the traditional brick and mortar was, and the margins are much better. And then on top of that, you can build on it, because now that patient is not just seeing that one doctor. They might see the psychiatrist on the platform that we have, or the counselor, or the pharmacist, or the physio, and so on. And so it's one of those things where we're trying to not only make it very convenient and effective and better care, but also capture that whole ecosystem. So if you make things intuitive, people will buy into it.
Okay, and what's the revenues right now? What are you doing in terms of revenues at the moment?
We're growing really fast. I mean, it's one of those things where, again, I can say it's a marathon, but at a sprint pace, basically, is what we're doing right now. And so we exited 2019 with about 11.5 million run rates, I believe. And we're expecting growth from there this year. We have made further acquisitions this year, and we'll continue to make acquisitions. We're about to close. We just closed one right now, which was a clinic doing 3 million in revenue. It only cost us, I think, 200,000 cash and about 500,000 in stock. We have another clinic acquisition that should be closing relatively soon, and it opens up a brand new area in the biggest population in Canada. I think they have like 15 million patients in that one province alone. And then we have other acquisitions that will be closing as well. So, and other ones, we have a very strong pipeline of acquisitions coming up too. But one of the ones that we just announced is called Snap Clarity, and we're really, really excited about that one. So that should close over the next couple of weeks here. And Snap Clarity,
I was going to say, what does Snap Clarity do?
Yeah, I encourage. So before COVID, I've always said that mental health was always going to be the driver for telemedicine. So if there's anything that pushed telemedicine to the forefront and gets a lot of attention and would kind of move it forward, would be mental health. Mental health is the best ways through telemedicine. It's much better, much more effective, honestly, than sometimes face-to-face, especially when you have anxious patients and anxious teenagers that don't want to come into a clinic situation or claustrophobic and so on. They're much more comfortable in their own setting. So telemedicine was always going to be that thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
100%. I mean, and that's why you wonder why you don't go to clients with teenagers that are anxious. I mean, like, well,
right. And they already use their phone. I mean, they actually, it's interesting because the culture now is, younger people, they don't even use phone. I mean, everything is text. They don't like interaction. They want like everything
video, and they want texting and stuff. And that's what Snap Clarity is. So Snap Clarity is the leading, I think, they have proprietary software, basically. I would encourage anybody to download right now and test it out. And it'll start asking you questions. And based on their proprietary kind of algorithm, it'll be able to give you a dashboard and connect you with a proper therapist. And they have access to, I think, 1,500 therapists as well. And so it's great because now you have that ability to connect patients with the correct therapist for the correct disease that they have, the mental health aspect of it. But with our acquisition, now we also have the physical side, because a lot of patients who might be anxious or depressed might also have chronic pain, right? And so if you don't treat the chronic pain, you're not going to get anywhere with their mental health condition either. And so now they have both the B2C and the B2B side of it, where they can do that directly to patients, where patients pay directly, monthly or whatever. And that gives them the ability to interact with somebody at all times, either the app and then, a human as well in the back end to be able to discuss things with them. But also now with our acquisition, the B2B side. So a lot of corporations, their biggest costs are our workers that miss time because of depression and anxiety and other mental health conditions. But now if you can tell them, not only are we going to cover that for you as a company for your workers, but we also have the physical side as well, where now if they have a physical problem, they can also see a family doctor or a specialist as well to take care of that aspect of it. So they're going to get a lot of B2B business that we'll be able to announce post acquisition, hopefully, and talk about some of these clients that are coming on board.
Okay, we got a bunch of questions coming. Okay, so one last question, then we'll go to the chat. We got a bunch of people here. So you're doing last year 11 million. What are you going to do this year, and what do you think you're going to do this year with everything?
I'm not going to go into projections too much this year,
okay.
But we are definitely going to be much higher than that. I think the key thing to understand is, people can do math as well. So we're pretty transparent with the acquisitions and what the revenues are. So if we exited, 2019 with 11.5 million, our latest two acquisitions alone, I think are close to 5 million right there. And so I think, people can start looking at the numbers and figuring these out. Yeah.
But I guess the key takeaway is that you're acquiring these clinics. I mean, the idea is to leverage them into that telemedicine thing, which it's not really, it's not a role of affiliate. It's really the idea is it gives you the.
It's the future of healthcare delivery. Like I said, when I say the future of healthcare delivery, it's providing patients, making them customers for the very first time. I mean, maybe it's different depending on where you live, but you rarely historically have treated patients as customers, and with the convenience and the care and the how can I explain it? The continuity basically, and the branding, so that they know that they always have somebody available. So I don't know when's the last time as a patient you'd be able to connect with somebody right away if you needed to. about your health condition or your kid's health condition or your parents' health condition, and not just your family doctor, but the nurse, you know, or the specialist. I mean, that's what I'm talking about is to do that properly, you have to have a combination of the two things. You need a small footprint, but you need that huge vertical through telemedicine as well above it. And that's a huge, huge market. So One Life or One Medical in the States is a good example of something that you'll see kind of going forward. And that's really the type of thing that you should look at. But you're right. One last thing, Jack, I know you're going to jump in here, but every clinic we bring in, think of it as one doctor that now is not only seeing their own patients, or one specialist that's not only seeing their own patients, but seeing other patients across.
It's a leverage. It's a tremendous.
And that one doctor bringing in his 2,000 patients that he already has onto our platform on top of it. So you think of it as a patient acquisition play as well that way, and the cost of it associated with it.
Yeah, it's very clever. And I think the main thing is there's this shortage of primary care doctors right now. That's the big problem. And I think the only, I mean, you tell me, from what I'm understanding is that telemedicine is really the only way to close that gap, that address the problem of this shortage of primary.
It's the great equalizer. 100%. It's the great equalizer. When COVID hit and we launched the telemedicine services, we had people from small towns all over, like thanking us, like they were like almost in tears because they were scared, this scary disease that was killing people, and they didn't have access to anybody. Clinics were closed, or they didn't have a clinic. They couldn't go to emergency. They weren't allowed to go if they're sick. They had questions about their kids or themselves or their parents. And it created the emergency lines were all filled up. It is the great equalizer, and it is something that you're going to see evolution to make it better. And that's really our focus.
It's interesting when you think about it. Like, you're serving a very important need with this telemedicine, because let's say somebody's 80 years old, right? They're living by themselves. They can't get out of the house. They may not even have a major problem, but if they can see a doctor on video, they can have that interaction. It gives them peace of mind, and maybe they can get some sort of their pulse, whatever things you can get from these new devices.
Think of the Apple Watch. So the Apple Watch, I always mention because I think it's great, and you're going to see more and more features coming out of it. It picks up if someone falls already. So, if an elderly person falls, it knows that they fell, and it asks, should I call 911? So imagine now that Apple Watch saying, do you want to see the doctor now? Or your appointment is starting. Are you ready? Kind of thing. And being able to do video, through that or through the iPad. Having nurses, home care nurses, being able to visit these centers or the patients, and now being able to connect with the doctor, the specialist, and the pharmacist while they're there. I mean, it's really the future.
And the Western world is aging. I mean, this is
yeah.
So let's go to some questions. Okay, so I think people have had enough of me. So Graham is okay. So you see Graham's question there?
Yes.
Okay, so Graham is a fan. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to Mark.
Yeah. So with Graham, I would say you're right, and I would say to you exactly what I just said before, that it's political suicide for anybody anywhere around the world to ever take telemedicine away anymore. And so this is the future. This is like not even the first inning, like I said, and it's only going to grow bigger and have better access. And like I said, as a patient, for the first time, you're going to be treated as a customer, which is really amazing. Yeah. Sorry. And the next one you said, at the EMR consolidation, it already has. I mean, EMRs, electronic medical records, again, it have already been consolidating over time. There's so many. In Canada, it's been consolidating for a while, where QHR was bought for $170 million, about 7-8 time multiples, I think. And that was like 4 years ago, before it even got hot. And you're going to see more and more consolidation. TELUS bought a lot of different companies as well. But you'll see continuingly more and more. Is acquiring clinics in U.S. viable, or are there barriers to enter the market? So Graham, again, great question. When I mention having a footprint in a location is really important, I'm going to say having a footprint in a location is really important. So we don't expand, as a virtual offering without having a footprint usually in that location. I'll just say that.
Okay.
3 million new patients in the app. We already have Mustafa. So I mean, we already announced over 100,000 patients, and a lot of them came from that. I'm assuming everybody can see these questions, right?
Yeah. We're video. That's the great thing.
Okay, great. Yeah, you're right. I mean, but we already have started doing that. So when we talk about telehealth companies and patient acquisition costs and what it costs them and so on, it's usually pretty high when you talk to the other players in the world, whether it's a Teladoc or Babylon or Maple or whatever. They spend a lot of money on advertising directly getting those patients. We haven't had to until so we actually haven't done a lot of direct consumer advertising until recently. So now we're doing Facebook ads and Google ads, and you're going to see us all over in the different parts of the media and so on. Very aggressive advertising. But historically, to get to that 100,000+, it was organic from that low-hanging fruit, like we said, and we're still seeing a lot of those 3 million, coming continuously with that.
Okay. Can you talk about Quebec?
This is the biggest question I get every single time, whether I'm on the roadshow or on one of these things, is Quebec. Quebec is really important to us. We are actively looking at Quebec as well in terms of expansion. I go back to the question I think Graham said is we will have a footprint in Quebec before we launch in Quebec. So, look for those kind of announcements.
Okay. Okay. Competitive advantages.
Yeah. So competitive advantages are a lot of things I mentioned before. The future of healthcare, as I mentioned, is not the virtual walk-in model, the virtual walk-in clinic. And I want you guys to really understand this. It's really important because there's a lot of, again, like I said, shiny new objects out there saying we're doing telehealth. The amount we get paid by the government for a simple visit is a certain amount. It's not a terrible amount. It's usually like $36 a visit. But for telehealth, that's not bad because we get 30% margins on that. And you can also provide other parts of the ecosystem to that same patient. Where the value is providing what we call full service care to that patient. So if that patient is actually a family medicine patient or one of your patients as part of the that ecosystem, you get all the bonuses that come with it. So in the different parts of Canada and so on, you get huge bonuses, hundreds of dollars, depending on what they have. So if they have diabetes, you get certain amount of bonuses. If they have heart disease, you get more bonuses and so on, because they're more complicated to take care of. So they're trying not to reward the walk-in clinic model and then in turn the virtual walk-in model. And so that's one thing. So one of the differentiators we make is we focus on that patient health record that I mentioned before. We are very unique in that every patient that downloads the app and registers gets a chart in our system that stays with them forever. And so what that does is it creates a situation where now we can take on those patients as family practice patients and provide them full service care if they don't have a doctor and so on, and having that ability to capture that full ecosystem opportunity to that one patient versus that one episodic visit, which does not provide good care, and the next doctor doesn't know what the last doctor gave. The patient is not involved in their own care. That's not good. That's not good. That's like going back to the old, brick and mortar walk-in clinic. I mean, there's a reason they were going out of business before COVID, right?
Okay. What's the difference between doc and well?
Okay, I was wrong about the Quebec question. This is probably the number one question I get. So Well is a great company, absolute monster in the space, great leader. They've been incredibly successful in the space. They've been able to acquire and aggregate a bunch of different clinics. I think they're up to like 20 clinics. And then what they did was they acquired different service providers for an open source EMR. So is an open source EMR that's owned by McMaster, and they're able to consolidate all the providers that provided that open source EMR to clinics. So by doing that, they get direct access to a lot of doctors that use that open source EMR. And then what they did was they partnered with other, and I think they took an equity position in other third-party vendors that would provide other tools, patient tools like telemedicine and so on. And they've been very, very successful and led by, Hamid, who's had previous successors in other fields doing the same kind of thing, and that's great. And I think they're trading at probably $450 million valuation or something right now. So what's different is that we own our own EMR, our own technology, and we're able to build all those patient tools in-house, and we're able to do all these things and offer all these opportunities without any other partnerships or answering to anybody else really, but also no revenue sharing that we would have to do or dealing with any third-party vendors, which historically really is the reason I started CloudMD, is because I got tired dealing with a lot of third-party vendors that had no interest in innovation or integration.
Okay. Chris is asking.
Yeah. Yeah, so Chris, the answer is just wait. There'll be more on this. I think one thing differentiating us as well, and you mentioned Maple, which is really important. So Maple charges, right? So Maple charges to see the doctor, and they charge quite a bit sometimes. And so one of the things that really differentiates us as well is that when everything I just mentioned right now, in those 2 provinces that we already launched, and eventually, like I said, right across, and you'll see more and more soon, is we don't charge the patient anything. And so that's, again, it provides a really low barrier for patients to be seen. We get paid by the government, and we get paid on time every 2 weeks with no problems. And it makes it so that there's a very low barrier to entry for a lot of these patients and these corporations. So we will be making a lot more announcements on that space for sure. And again, look to the Snap Clarity announcement and some other announcements we'll be making in that space as well.
Okay. So let me jump in with a question. We didn't really talk too much about the telemedicine kiosks. You've launched this with pharmacies. What's that business model about, and how big do you think this can scale once it succeeds?
Yeah, so when I mentioned like the very early stages of a big industry, think about pharmacies and medication and fulfillment and all that. So Amazon is coming, like I mentioned in the last interview. Amazon, I'll repeat again in case somebody hasn't seen the last one, but Amazon bought a company called PillPack a few years ago, and PillPack was a Canadian company. And what they do is they package your medications and they send it to you. So they send it to you in this big box, and you just cut off your morning sachet. And in that morning sachet, you'll have, your blood pressure medication, your diabetes medication, whatever. You don't have to think. Just say morning dose, take it. Monday afternoon dose, you just rip it off and take it. So they package your medications for you and they send it to you, right? So it's a kind of a no-brainer. So Amazon bought that a few years ago. And then they bought a virtual nurse, AI nurse, triaging type of company called Health Navigator in the States. And so Health Navigator, remember that AI nurse I talked about that we're going to be launching as well, where it'll ask you the questions before you see the doctor. It'll ask you kind of very smart questions based on algorithms to figure out why you're seeing the doctor and be able to give that information to the doctor. So they bought that company last year. And then they launched something called Amazon Care, which is telemedicine to their own employees initially, but eventually it'll be to customers. And then they launched, if you watch enough TV, you'll see them, is the ads called Amazon Pharmacy. So Amazon Pharmacy is now coming live. And what they're going to be doing eventually is when you go to Amazon, is eventually you'll be able to get your prescriptions delivered with your packages. So it would just be second nature that if you need your medications, you'll just get it delivered to you as well. And you might be able to see a doctor as well through their platform. So these pharmacies, brick and mortar pharmacies around North America and the world know that. And they're trying to catch up very, very quickly because people are moving away from brick and mortar to the online convenience of fulfillment of prescriptions, these online pharmacies. And so we've done deals with pharmacies now. The first pharmacy we mentioned was Save-On, which is the biggest grocery chain in Western Canada, owned by the Jimmy Pattison Group, where you can capture the patients that are going physically to that pharmacy so that they don't have to leave that pharmacy if they ran out of medication or they have a bladder infection that just needs treatment, or a rash that's not responding to a cream. Instead of them leaving the pharmacy, trying to find a clinic, ending up in emergency or not being able to be seen for a few days, they can now go to the kiosk or the consultation room, swipe their card, see one of our doctors on demand while they're there. So the value proposition for the pharmacy is great. But more importantly to that, and I think this is going to be important for everybody to understand, is everything I just mentioned is the future is online, right? So having the ability now for these pharmacies and these grocery chains to have a link on their website to connect the patients to the doctor and even get a prescription delivered to them is the future. And that is something that you'll be hearing a lot more about.
Okay. Let's see. I think we're gonna almost done for time. So anybody has questions? I'll jump in with. Let me see. Okay, no questions. I'll jump in with the last question, favorite, which is top 3 reasons why investors should consider CloudMD stock today.
One, we're undervalued. So we're trading at such low multiples compared to anybody else in the space at all, for various reasons. We're well funded. I'm gonna use that all in one, just so you know. I'm gonna combine that all to one. We're well funded as well, so we can execute on our business plan going forward. We have over 13 million in the bank, I think, from our last raise, and we're gonna be executing on that. Number 2, we are built by doctors, kind of thing. And so, I mean, we have over 100 years of experience on our team on the medical field, which is really important because we understand the idea that what doctors need and their behaviors that resist and so on, what patients are looking for, and we understand the government side as well, how governments kind of approach these things. And we have that covered with a great team as well. And thirdly, I would say is that I hope you buy CloudMD, but I hope you just come into the space, period, because it's a great opportunity, like I said before, that is just beginning. And I know people worry about 5 cents here, and I mean, it's going to look silly, I think, for any of these companies in the space to be any investor to be worried about any of those small price changes over time, because it's such a huge opportunity that you're getting in at a very early stage, and it's really exciting.
Okay, we got one last question. Okay, so this is an interesting question. You have doctors speaking other languages.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I can't say your name. I can't read that, but yeah, but you're right, exactly. We will be launching certain features where you'll be able to pick the doctor that you want, and maybe you continue with that doctor each time. Pick the language, so that if you have elderly parents that speak a certain language, they'll be able to use that. Pick certain specialties, so maybe doctors with certain specialties or special interests that you might be wanting to continue with. So in the future, near future, you'll be able to kind of really get really good care from exactly what you're looking for, and get that continuity of care in the most convenient way, usually from home or work, in the language that you need as well.
Okay. Dr. Hamza, on that note, I want to thank you, and we'll look forward to following the news, seeing the progress, and we'll have you back on the next Superstock live stream, probably in the mid-August. In about 2-3 weeks, we'll have you back. Everybody who's watching now, they're obviously welcome to join us then. So thank you again, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, bye.
Thank you, everybody.